So I think we can go ahead and call this meeting to order for the Waste Reduction Subcommittee for this March, should be March 15th, indeed. And the agenda will follow the same format as last week's Education Committee. And I don't believe that was posted on the district site, but it is accessible in the CAC's Dropbox folder under the subcommittee / waste diversion, both in that directory itself and in the working document that we've been working along. So I think we go ahead and get started with the first item on the agenda, which is digging deeper into the waste diversion specific education. Since that is an essential underlying topic for everything, and we had touched on it at our first meeting session, now is an opportunity to perhaps discuss in greater detail the plans, the education-specific plans that we have in mind. Does anyone have anything in particular they want to open up with? If not, I see there's been quite a flurry of activity on the working doc in the last hour or so, and I've been able to keep abreast with about half of it, I would estimate. So I have a few thoughts that I was going to mostly reiterate from the preceding meeting to see if there was any more details to discuss on those. But if not, do either Ryan or Morning, do either of you have any particular things that you want to call attention to right now?
Not a specific thing.
I'm good for right now.
Okay. So to me, this is, I guess, the 5-year plan topic that seems, that I'm the most interested in because it seems like the lowest hanging fruit. I think I may have said this at the preceding meeting, but all of the infrastructure already exists for it. It's just a matter of doing a better job of using it. So there's no wheels to invent. And yeah, I don't think that culturally there's any opposition to it. I mean, recycling in particular has had quite a groundwork laid over the last couple of decades. So now it's just a matter of really making sure that people understand how to do it right so it's productively done. And I think that also touches on the big education topic from the education subcommittee about really just homologating all of these resources, I'm imagining under the district's website in particular, for providing that education, and also with the outreach campaign to be able to bring people to that resource. For the ones that stand out to me the most are motivations for composting, and then best practices for doing it, and then also recycling best practices. I noted reuse as well. I don't know, I didn't have any great ideas for how reuse education would look, but it seemed worth mentioning as a factor to include in education as well.
Yeah, I think that the education piece here would largely benefit from focusing on organics. I mean, on organics and recycling contamination problems, because like Cheryl Munson sent us over the weekend a link to a Trevor Noah show that was just recent, and we were watching some other ones too. That, by and large, it seems like in terms of recycling, contamination is the biggest problem nationally, and which affects local markets and global markets. And then what we're trying to kind of stave off in the organic sector is that happening there too, because organics getting contaminated can really bust up those machines pretty bad. And we even had a local operation shut down for multiple weeks when some forks and glass bottles from IU students ended up in their mix. So yeah, contaminants education seems to be like the big juice that's worth the squeeze in my eyes, but kind of along the lines of jump starting people's interest in reduction and diversion generally. Like if right now they're having a hard time distinguishing between like correct recycling and wish recycling or aspirational recycling, you know, how do we overcome that hurdle? Because it was interesting, you know, like the Trevor Noah show, the link that Cheryl sent out over the weekend, like it's something that even I forget sometimes is like, you know, when you go to put the plastic, Gatorade bottle into the recycling, you have to take the lid off and then also pop that little circular ring tab off too. Otherwise, they're not really separated and they can't be recycled as well. So it's little stuff like that that I think a lot of people think that they're diverting correctly when they might not be. And it's even more of a, I think, consideration now within the municipal bounds of City of Bloomington because they moved to the single stream collection system. And even though the studies showed that that drives up overall rates of recycling, which is great, it also enhances the contamination percentages. And I know they're trying to track that down with like a camera system and their new routing software, Routeware. But it still seems like a major issue everywhere.
You know, Ryan, that's a really good point, and I actually watched that segment as well, and that was the first time I had ever heard that the bottles and rings, or the caps and rings, needed to be separated from water bottles, and part of me questions the validity of that, and it gets to a really nitty-gritty question about how to determine what is and is not recyclable categorically, because there are so many things that are non-obvious and unmarked, even in the age of, you know, a lot of clear recycling information, and even reaching out to recycling like service providers. It's really hard to get that information, and I would love to have a really comprehensive guide. And actually, the City of Bloomington fairly recently, I don't know if you've noticed, but on their sanitation page, they have a little web app for searching for specific items or listing items by name, which is great if you have one specific item, but not for something practical that you can like post over your recycling and see, okay, you know, comprehensively, this yes, this no. If you have to look up every single item that you want to throw away, you've sort of lost the benefit of having that service. So in terms of the education, maybe that would be something good to task the district with in the 5-year plan, is getting that comprehensive information. Like one thing that always comes to mind is plasticware. Like, is it of type 2 or 4, like polyurethane, or is it not? And is it always yes or no? Are there different types of plasticware? And is there any way to distinguish and to make a definitive decision about, yes, these can be recycled, or no, they should never be, because we can never be certain if they're recyclable or not. Yeah, honestly, that seems like the best way to do it, because I think that's an important part of getting recycling straight, is we can't tell people, hey, you need to stop contaminating, and then not to be able to tell them what is or is not a contaminant. Because presently, even as somebody who is proactively interested in getting that information, I feel like it's difficult to accomplish, and there's still things that I question often.
If I can shift a little bit, as far as education goes and reuse, there are organizations in the community who focus on reuse. So the something for teachers, it's by the Rotary Club by 9th Street Park. There's it's like just a reuse art and like school supply place organization. They would be a good partner organization to like teach people how to reuse stuff in non-traditional ways, or in ways that differ from the intended use of a thing. I also have worked with a different organization that does the same type of thing, and they have like workshops, like here's a kit, you're going to assemble a kit full of weird things, but in the end you can make this thing with your students or whatever. So it doesn't have to be very specific as to like, here, you can use bottle tabs for this. It's, you know, a series of workshops with partners and other educators and things like that for creative uses for various things, either in an education system or not. And especially when there are lots of bulk items. So like companies might get rid of something that they just have from manufacturing that, you know, is a byproduct, but could be used creatively in some way. So as far as reuse goes, I think that working with partner organizations and others who are interested would be a way to address that.
Thank you. And Ryan, also to your remark about getting people interested in waste diversion, I think that in the scope of the broad education aspect of the plan, the sort of info videos, and I know Morning I'd seen a comment of yours about reaching out to more than just youth. And that's sort of what I'm imagining the info videos being, is really for an adult audience in particular, and not like a kitschy sort of video, but like a real, like, try to get some footage of inside of recycling facilities and like ride-alongs and hauling vehicles, and to like make it an intellectually engaging experience for adults, and then also incorporate some of the, I guess, the negative aspects, the things that make it necessary. I mean, the reason that we're all here is that there are very real consequences to not doing these things, and to making, I think there's an advantage to making people aware of what those are through these educational videos as well, rather than it just being like a, oh, there's 2 bins and I can throw it in whichever one I want to, and it, you know, doesn't really matter much because they both disappear.
Yeah, I think that's great, because people might not believe that contamination matters. Like, oh, there's food particles on it, but if the plastic's getting melted, why does it matter if there's some food particles? It's just gonna, you know, it's inconsequential. So I think that that's a good tactic too.
I have thought that hundreds of times. Like, you know, this is just going to cook off when they melt it down. And it's so, yeah, it's wild to me. It'd be fun maybe even to list out other common occurrences like that, where like even folks like us that have been like, oh, I'm sure that this happens. And then it turns out like that it doesn't. Because I think a bunch of people would have a similar, because even like the water bottle thing last night, popping that ring off, I'm like, whoa, okay. And then, you know, even and the greasy pizza box one was one that it took me a minute to wrap my head around, like, oh, when they try to melt that down, all that grease just kind of pools at the top. How do they skim it? You know, but it's not until you, like you're saying, like until you really like work through the process that you're like, oh, that's why we need to do that. Oh.
Yeah, I would love to have in those educational videos snippets, like video snippets of some of the processing, if possible. Like, get into, I don't know, have any idea what the actual transformation of those materials is like, because I know the district and general recycling programs operation is just to bale it and sell it as a material and not actually process any of it. But if it were to be possible to get to some of the buyers on those markets and ask if we could, you know, get information on helping to improve the quality of the material that they're buying, might be amenable to that. I'm also going to be trying to read through some of the content that you guys have been putting into the working doc. So if there's anything that you want to discuss, feel free to bring it up now. Otherwise, I'll just be sitting silently reading things for a moment, or a few moments probably.
I'll send it in the chat box. but our partners at Cook turned us on to a innovative plastic recycler that's new in the state called Brightmark, and they are apparently able to take kinds of plastic that traditional purchasers and reprocessors can't. And I don't know what their process is that makes it unique in terms, like they can do plastic bags and stuff where and films that others can't. I'm not sure even they might even be able to do the cutlery thing. I'll send the website now. I'm just now skimming through it and then I got lost. Sorry.
Sounds good.
Yeah, what would need to go to landfill if all those things are taken care of?
Diapers.
Would you say dirt?
Diapers.
Oh, diapers.
Diapers already constitute.
Cloth diapers.
Sure. Oh, yeah. It's easy for me to say as somebody with no children, but I know diapers constitute an absurd ratio of solid waste that gets landfilled.
I see. So they divert hundreds of thousands of tons of plastic waste each year from landfills and incinerators, and they convert it into 18 million gallons of ultra low sulfur diesel fuel and naphtha blend stocks and 6 million gallons of wax. That's more plastic than the weight of 5,400 tractor trailers or 7 Brooklyn bridges. So it's plastic to low sulfur diesel, naphtha blend, and wax.
Is that good?
I don't know. I was thinking like I know coal to diesel is not good, and so is plastic to diesel any better? I don't know.
I'm going to guess, given previous trends, not likely. But that's just my pessimistic assessment of how humans tend to approach things.
Well, we should look into that more before doing anything with it.
And Ms. Jones, I also wanted to ask to verify that you were able to locate the working document, if that's something that interests you for the content that's already been submitted for this subcommittee. I apologize if there isn't a lot of conversational content necessarily because so much of it's already been entered in there as a shared resource.
Yeah, actually, I've had some rather big problems with county drop boxes.
Oh, no.
I have a personal one that I use for my business, and somehow at some point the county swept that into their whole system, and all of my business information was available to everyone in the county.
Goodness.
And because of that, I'm a little there's a lot of confusion over passwords and things, and I'm hoping eventually someone in technical services will be able to help me straighten this out, but I'm kind of nervous about Dropbox at this point.
Understandably so. If you want to, I'm putting a link in the chat that would give you viewing access to the document if you don't already have read and write access to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to be able to.
And Ryan, I do also think that you have a great point about the district playing a role in maybe facilitating the establishment of markets, particularly for composting, to avoid the same fate of the current recycling situation.
Indeed and agreed. I mean, with large parks operations and landscaping at every building and other places, modifying county government and city government standard operating procedures for best management practices involving compost could not only cut their costs substantially in terms of having to buy other turf rollouts and fertilizers and pesticides, and instead they could both save money, be more ecological, and support the local organics economy by modifying some of those SOPs. And I think even when Adam and Alex were both on, it came up even that they had mentioned like maybe that like people that contract for event spaces. Oh wait, no, that's on that's on the diversion end. I'm sorry, that's more on the reduction end to get people that like that use city facilities to also contract recycling and composting services. But that's different. This is more back end stuff like application and landscaping. There's also something like, like I don't know if Monroe County Plan Commission or Buildings Department has a green development ordinance that is similar or comparable to the cities, but I know to like satisfy green development ordinance stipulations, that developers have to check off kind of a certain menu of boxes, and maybe use of compost products in their landscaping could be one of those boxes, or even for things like backfill. I mean, around the country, compost use in backfill for both road construction and like site development can promote the resprouting of native species that also retain the soil better and keep the stormwater drains from being overflowed or overflooded with sediment. So as an erosion control measure and a seed germination enhancer, compost could be used by road construction crews and also any building development.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. And really, if there's not a lot of discussion to be had on other topics, we could go ahead and jump to the next agenda item of starting to work on our goals and objectives.
Maybe we can, not quite yet. So if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So when I'm looking at the document, the goals and objectives are under the circle bullet point. So there's the squares that are the subpoints, and then the empty circles that are the main points. So for waste diversion, main points, we have recycling, reuse, compost, and education, and creative reuse, which creative reuse and reuse might go together. It seems like there's something missing, which is just plain diversion. Maybe there's a different term for it, but for things that don't need to be or can't be recycled. So it's like a usable item, for example, doesn't need to be creatively reused. Maybe that would fit under the reuse section, which might require like the changing of hands from the person who no longer needs the thing to someone who does. But on the document, there is no content under the reuse point. And maybe that's just because we haven't gotten to, filling in all of the blanks so far, but we have a lot under recycling, and we have some under education. But I wonder, and maybe we can move on to goals and objectives, but I did want to point out that there's no content under reuse or composting, and I just wanted to, just point that out. So maybe we can fill those in later, or maybe we would want to have like some kind of brainstorming session now, and maybe there's an additional main point that hasn't been addressed, but I didn't want to only talk about recycling and some about composting. I mean, I can see that you've been taking notes on the document, so a lot of what we've covered in this conversation is now on here, but
To wit, the origin of these notes is just me scratching something out to have for discussion in the meeting. Everything that is under goals and objectives, like the image is from the 2020 City of Bloomington Climate Action Plan, but then the points that say recycling, reuse, and composting, those were just the 3 subheadings in the 92 plan. And so I just broke those 3 out as distinct sections and started going through the 92 plan and listing things that either we touched on or that, could be repurposed from 92. But I ran out of time. I didn't even finish the recycling part. And so I didn't get notes up on reuse or composting. And that was just me fleshing something out from the 92 plan. So then there's 3 X's in a row, followed by education. And I just started writing out education because that's what folks were talking about right now in the meeting. And then when you brought up creative reuse, I just added that too. And to it also on the note of reuse, I feel like reuse very much falls into like the reduction category. Like we talked about reuse and fixability a lot last time. And it seems like the 92 plan kind of just repeats that kind of discussion of reuse as both a diversion tactic and a product of reduction. So it made me wonder even where like what does reuse fit better under reduction, and therefore did we cover it adequately, or does it also need to go under diversion, and what separates reduction reuse from diversion reuse, looking at reuse as a strategy?
Two thoughts on that, if I may. The first is, if you look at the very top of the document, it defines the Indiana code for what the management plan needs to cover. And that's true of all of the documents. So in this one, it says specifically, it must establish a policy for the district that reflects the needs of the district, provide an integrated approach to solid waste management that includes, in this case, alternatives to complete or partial dependence on final disposal facilities, including recycling and composting. So this is more about, avoiding final disposal, which to your point, I mean, your remark is to reuse the thing rather than throw it away. So that's a method of avoiding final disposal. But I want to compare it to what's stated for the source reduction portion, which I think is slightly different, but not significantly. I'm browsing there now.
Yeah, I guess if we think about waste diversion as things that are no longer usable in a current form and not sending them to landfill versus things that are still usable, that's the question. Is it being diverted, or is it the waste is being reduced because it's not being considered waste? So it's kind of semantics. But so yeah, it probably could fall under both of them. And I think at the reduction meeting, I don't remember how much we talked about consumer waste source reduction. I think we talked a lot about industry and retail and things like that. So I wouldn't want the consumer to get left out on both of them, but it doesn't matter to me which one it goes under as long as it's addressed. I guess we did talk about it a little bit when we're talking about, some kind of facility to house items that are no longer wanted. So.
Yeah, it's not cut and dried to me, but I get the sense that it leans more towards reduction, or at least that's where our conversations have, I think, gravitated more. Maybe worth mentioning in both. And also to your point, Morning, about the content of the shared doc, as Ryan had already mentioned, the goals and objectives that are under the discussion section were just me trying to designate a spot for the layout of specifically putting things with respect to goals and objectives versus things that are general discussion on the topic. So it's the, I guess, final goals and objectives that are really going to contain the refined versions of what we want to include. And that said, is there still more on the topic of reuse that you want to discuss now, apart from what we've covered between the two subcommittees?
I think we're all three of us are on both of them, so we can just be aware that it should be thoroughly included in one or the other, and maybe not partially in both, just so it has, a full discussion or full goal or objective. So it doesn't fall to the wayside in both of them. So it doesn't matter to me which one.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to reflect on that. It seems the more I think about it, it sort of morphs into the two different categories depending on how I approach it. So let me give that some more deliberate consideration to develop a more rounded opinion. So if that is the case, if we are to start including our final goals and objectives, say one is obviously education.
Is that too broad? I'm not saying it is, but I am wondering if that is too broad, or if we're just going to keep refining it until it's some kind of measurable or more specific thing.
So I intended to add meaningful details in the description and just to treat education as a title for the goal. Well, I see what you mean. Is educating people too wide of a goal versus setting up specific education goals?
And we might not have a number now, but if we want to break it up into consumer versus producer, like, I don't know, educate X% of consumers, or I'm not really sure, but there are lots of streams of education that we've talked about, different audiences, different goals for education. So it could be like consumer education about recyclables or something, or maybe that's not even specific enough, but maybe it is, I'm not sure.
Does it differ much though in terms of how to direct the waste streams between residents and businesses? I mean, essentially the services provided to both, the services provided to them both is the same, right? Like it's the same recycling facility, it's the same composting. It's just they may be dealing with different amounts and different materials internally, but they still go to the same system. So they'll still need to know the same things about contamination for both and best practices for both and why it's important to use them both.
Yeah, it's a fair question.
And I just thought of a distinction that might help us. So like last time when we were talking about reduction, and our discussion did focus a lot on commercial generators, and talking about like, them making cheap products that break, and how do we get them to make products that last longer? That's an uphill battle. It's hard to win. How do you get industrial producers to use recyclable inputs? Well, that's an uphill battle that's hard to win. And so we got into things that were about procurement policies for companies and other kinds of contracting stuff, um, especially with regards to reducing food waste. A lot of commercial kitchens overbuy their stock and supply. And one thing we've noticed that with our commercial kitchen clients, that actually drops for them radically as soon as they start to actually notice and count what it is they're throwing away. But then we also brought up that there was this new venture in Indiana called Flow Waste, which helps commercial kitchens track that inventory and also where in the production line it gets wasted. And so that, again, we're thinking about contracting and, software or hired roles like staff positions for helping reduce waste in the production side. But it seems like for the diversion side of reusables, it's the thing well, who drives the truck? Who buys the truck and who gets paid to drive the truck around that collects potential reusables and brings them to the warehouse that we want to construct to house them? It's like a logistics operation is needed to gather those reusables and bring them somewhere, or if that's automatically logisticized by individual people. And so to wit, on the same way about things like food waste, one of the diversion sides isn't just about composting. Even the U.S. Compost Council talks a lot about the food waste pyramid and how, national standard is to try to get that food into mouths first, hungry people mouths. And if not hungry people mouths, then hungry animal mouths. And if not to hungry animal mouths, then to convert it into energy in some way. And if not to do that, then compost it. And if not to do that, then landfill it. So it seems like maybe with reusables, there's a diversion component that has to do with someone trucking that stuff around from where it comes from to where it can be aggregated. Just like at least a good chunk of the organics diversion can also be a discussion about how to get restaurant leftovers from kitchen back of houses to the hungry people that need it. And I know that, for the last, 8-10 years, I've been involved in the Food Policy Council and the Center for Sustainable Living. I mean, those are long-standing goals. Like having a trucking system, vis-a-vis the food bank or whoever else, to get that edible food to people and secondarily edible food to animals, I think would be a major innovation.
I do agree, but wonder if that's outside the purview of district activities.
I
I
agree.
mean, it is waste in a sense, and the district's, tasks with managing waste for the county, but at the same time, setting up infrastructure like that, or defining a different waste stream, I think, again, also evokes the recollection that one thing the board had mentioned was an interest in having sort of 10, 20-year goals with 5-year objectives specified within them. And that's something that I keep forgetting myself and should really make a point to remind others of as well, that while we're making a 5-year plan, the board also wants to see big picture plans. So something like your reuse stream warehouse could be in the 20-year plan, and then specify a 5-year objective of maybe defining the logistics, like you talked about, Ryan, like assessing costs and space and property for setting that up, rather than just putting in the 5-year plan, develop reuse or food stream's entire system.
Even if setting up a logistics program is outside the scope, it seems like it would still fit in the education component, like, for the food waste pyramid, it is within reason to educate about that kind of thing. And the restaurants can do what they want. They can reach out to the food bank or to a different group. They could forge a partnership with a farmer who has, pigs or, whatever would eat what they have. So even if, I think that we don't have to get into the logistics to talk about, ideals and better habits than just throwing things in landfill.
I like that. And I feel like the 92 plan also does a good job of showing not just like what the district as a government unit can do by itself, but also the partners and partnerships that the district can invoke and call into being. Like they had partnerships that they wrote out, like develop a partnership with IU, and they were like writing out developing partnerships with the Recycling Coalition, and developing partnerships with like the apartment complex owners or apartment managers association. So maybe a goal, like the 10-year goal, could be like have a developed program with Hoosier Hills Food Bank or surrounding pantries on a cooperatively promoted, fresh food delivery service. Something, I don't know how to word it. But so like the district could like promote and help connect some dots for the food bank, even if the district wouldn't be creating the service and running the service.
I think that would put it much more within the realm of district activity to serve as a coordinating role between existing interested bodies.
Mm-hmm.
I think you hit on a core concept there, coordinating. Yeah, the 92 plan talks about the district being a coordinating body, and all the Kessler reports talk about the district being a coordinating body. And it seems like as an intergovernmental...
You just muted yourself.
Oh, sorry. As an intergovernmental body, it seems ripe for that, since it incorporates officials from the county and the city. So...
And Morning, I really like your remark about adding food waste pyramid in the education, just to, make everyone aware rather than, again, trying to have the district provide the service for it, just to include that in part of the education. I think that should go straight to the final goals, and I'm typing it in.
I think a lot of what Ryan was saying earlier about what companies use and what they both what they don't use, like what they order and what they don't use, or what they make and they have remnants, like that could also be applied to anywhere that orders stuff. So what packaging does their orders come in? So like consumers might buy a package of zucchini that's shrink wrapped in styrofoam. I don't know if restaurants do that. That seems impractical, but if that's happening, that shouldn't happen, things like that. So I don't, maybe it's not as applicable because bakeries probably get 50-pound paper bags of flour, and that makes sense. But in other places, the packaging might not make sense. I don't know.
No, it definitely makes sense. Like in grocery stores, for example, you have like all of the eggshell type layers, cushion layers between produce items, and gosh, like Asian pears will all have that individual wrapping around them of that like foam web, I mean, that happens in bulk purchasing as well. It's not all in like nice cardboard crates that they're going to break down and send back for reuse.
Also, I know that a lot of retailers throw their cardboard away. Like some places do have a cardboard dumpster and others don't. And I don't know why that is. It seems pretty easy to just put your cardboard in a different box. I don't know the volume of it, but it kind of doesn't matter. It seems pretty simple to just separate at least cardboard, if not anything else.
I do want to note an idea on that topic. I don't know if this is the place to mention it, but if the district could have a role in that, great. Something, I know there's a lot of difficulty around containers and space and having mechanisms, vehicles capable of dealing with different types and sizes of containers. And I had the wild idea to be able to have like a dumpster divider where essentially you could just have a steel sheet down the middle, since essentially you're not producing any more waste. You don't need more dumpster space. It's the same amount of stuff. You're just separating it. So just being able to divide a dumpster in half, and you could put cardboard in one half and waste in the other half. You wouldn't have any new receptacles. You wouldn't need any new equipment. You could just do something clever with the lids. So you could dump one and not the other.
You'd have to make sure that one side was locked.
Yeah.
The right side was locked on the right day.
Exactly. But it's really manageable, a lot more than trying to carve out twice the dumpster space and having, you know, different trucks come, to deal with them both. But something I figured I'd throw out now, seeds in your brains in case you find a good application for that here or elsewhere.
I made a note of something similar in the document. So we have I don't know how many rural recycling centers, 5 or 6. And there are enough people who are outside of the city boundaries that aren't quite rural. And going to the recycling centers is not necessarily convenient. But it seems like it would be easy enough to have drop-off centers that didn't require an employee to be present, just like the same type of dumpsters, like a long dumpster that has, you know, the sections for whatever you put in, that are more frequently or more geographically, just like more of them, closer to, I don't know, different hubs or whatever. So like, you know, on the west side, there's, you know, there's like the Fresh Time or like the Kroger or whatever, like it's pretty close to city boundaries. A lot of people go there who don't live in the city and don't have recycling at home. If there's just like in the parking lot, you know, one of those big dumpsters for whatever, and people can put whatever. And maybe they're worried that people would put trash in it, but I don't know. That may or may not actually be an issue, especially if it was like kind of tucked away. But I don't know. I've been to other places where there were just unpersoned recycling bins and people just came and dropped them off. And I wonder if that would help people recycle more, especially if it's on their way to the grocery store. They'll take their bag of recyclables and dump them at that time. Just a thought.
Well, I definitely like the idea. The first thing that immediately pops to mind is like ownership rights, sacrifice of property, like parking spaces potentially, and extra, I don't know, liability for whoever's property that's on. You'd have to have a really, I mean, maybe like Blooming Foods or something that would be somebody who'd be more amenable to that in general, but I don't imagine any sort of major businesses jumping on board with that because of their fear of taking on any extra liability or giving up any of their space for any reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's also county parks. There's other county facilities that could hold something like that. So like Will Detmer Park on Vernal Pike, there might be room there for something like that, and that's already county property. I don't know. I think there are creative options for where they could be placed. I just think like, I think I was thinking like at Kroger or Fresh Time, like those parking lots are so big and they're never full. So like space wise, I don't know that that would be a big issue, but maybe liability would. But even if that was the case, you know, county or city might be willing to share, or like churches might, you know, things like that.
As we've been looking for different types of new collection vehicles, we also came across all sorts of interesting things like along these lines. They have like these trailers that are like maybe 12 to 20 feet long, that are divided into 1, 2, or 3 sections, that the trailer can be dropped somewhere and then people can access it to recycle whatever it is that they're trying to recycle. However, I'm wishing.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Sorry, I was hoping that Andrew Manley would be here because I had the question about there's some kind of Indiana Department of Environmental Management regulation on what volumes of what things can be collected where, because each one of the rural recycling sites has to be like recertified. I don't know how often, and I don't know whether it's just because they're collecting public stuff, which would interfere with our idea about expanding more drop-off places, or if it's just because it's like a district-owned facility, quote unquote. And if it's just as a facility is regulated like that, and a trailer wouldn't be, then it could be a partnership between, say, the district and Fresh Time to park one of those trailers there, you know, 3 days or 4 days a week, so that people don't have to hoof the extra distance all the way out to the Ord Road recycling center.
Yeah, I would suggest you could reach out to him. One thing I know you can do within the working doc is you can reference people. I don't know if you've seen that, but if you use the @ sign and then enter the person's email address, they'll get a Dropbox notification saying, hey, someone made a comment to you. So you could put a note about that in the file and put a comment referencing him and ask him if he can touch on that.
It might need to be a comment and not in the document itself.
Oh, is it? I thought you
Oh,
could do it.
I could be wrong.
No, yeah, you can do it. It's just you have to do it immediately after the @ sign. If you like use a space or move the cursor and then move back to it, it doesn't automatically tag people.
So this might be too, I don't know. It seems like it would be fun. I don't know if it's possible. So there are X number of Kroger stores, I don't know, 5 or whatever. So this could be like between them, like they could have a contest between each store to see who can reduce their waste or something. Or it could be between a number of stores or restaurants or whatever. But I think, it could be helpful if it was like within the same company to like show off or something to headquarters. But that might be a little bit challenging.
Gosh, based on the district's Green Business Series where they had the Kroger, I can't remember what his title was, essentially business management person who touched on their zero hunger, zero waste efforts, made it seem not likely that they were taking any of it very seriously or seriously engaging in any of it. And I don't imagine they would be receptive to anything that countered the business bottom line or.
So ridiculous because Kroger is on the refed board or something. It's just.
Yeah, pretty sure
you're in charge of your company. Like, be in charge of your company. If you care, then do something. Don't just sit on a board. Anyway.
Or ask for donations while you throw your food in the compactor so no one can get to it. But I'm sure we could all stand on a soapbox for a really long time about these things. That's not why we're convening. We'll do that on personal time.
I'll mute myself.
It does bring us pretty close to, in terms of the agenda planning, the end of the setting goals and objectives portion, or finalizing goals and objectives, and onto means of achievement conversation. I know we're going to be working on those over the coming week, but maybe it's in the best interest to just continue with fleshing out goals and finalization of goals and objectives while we're here, and then save the means of achievement and costs for the offline work.
That works for me, even just to sketch some things out that we can flesh out more later too. That's the thing too, just the diversion section is like the largest section of the plan. So if it takes us a little, maybe an extra meeting, it might be worth it.
Okay.
I'm guessing goal number 2, coordination, is for
Yeah,
food waste.
the thought was fleeting. It was for a number of things that I was going to try to come back to.
Okay, I'll leave it there.
Okay.
We didn't really talk. It's in the document, but we didn't specifically talk about like apartment complexes in this conversation tonight. And I wonder what goal addressing that would fall under.
I like that. And I think it's super important because it seems like everybody has the sense that that's where big gains could be made. And it's also one of the weirdest, given that in 92, they're like, we have this successful pilot program and there's 24 apartment complexes and it's all going awesome. And then we just never heard about it again. It's just like, well, what happened?
Seems like something valuable to know. Yeah, I'm trying to think of, again, the way that would best fit into a district's activity.
Well, if we were talking about having, zero waste or near zero waste in like contracts with the city, I wonder if there could be some other kind of related type thing. It would, a partnership with the city in some way, or maybe this could be another drop-off location. Like maybe there could be some in city limits for those who don't have recycling at their specific residence. I don't know. That would be hard though, because that would be more of a space issue than some of the outskirts.
Right.
What came up in a previous meeting that I think Isabel actually noted was that a lot of these apartment complexes, I don't know how many or what percentage, under the old development rules, the old development ordinances, they got what were called PUDs, or planned unit development grants or waivers that would allow them to implement their project, whether it was a hotel or an apartment complex or an eco village or whatever. And so a lot of apartment complexes ended up being approved. And in the PUD, there's kind of a quid pro quo with the city. And so the people approving the plan would be like, well, we'll let you do it if. And what Isabel noted was that sometimes that if was if you have recycling services for your residents. And so what would be an interesting goal would be just to review PUDs and green business development ordinance developments, because the green business development ordinance also has like this menu of things that if you check 6 of the 12 boxes, you can have a green development, something like this. What is the number of commitments made towards apartment recycling versus what apartments actually implemented and followed through?
I believe Adam Wason actually mentioned that he had said it would be interesting to follow up on those documents within the city to find out who's committed and follow up with them. And that's, yeah, again, very much inside the city's purview and not so much the districts. I guess that would be more of a district soliciting,
Yeah.
a solicitation effort to stay in touch with the city and try to get follow up on those efforts just to make sure that they're taking place.
Sounds good.
So for goal number 4, Ryan, I think you wrote establish compost market. Is that right?
That was me, but
Oh,
yes.
that's you. Well, I changed it because it sounded like a store where you would buy compost.
Oh, I see. I was changing it back. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I'm just wondering, how would what would be the district's role in establishing a market for compost? Oh, is that what you were saying, like using compost at the park facilities and things like that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that can be more explicit because it sounds like.
So yeah, once again, these are just titles. Like
working titles, yeah.
Yeah, try and keep them as titles, and I'm jumping around in all the things I'm filling in as we go from topic to topic, and as I'm able to recall thoughts from earlier on. So some of these are left, yeah, very nonsensically or vaguely because I'm trying to fill them in with the right content. But you're absolutely right. I had started to call the title Solicit City and County for SOP Best Practices, and I realized it was way too many words for a title. Oops. Okay. One morning, to follow up on your previous question, the coordination was about for routing usable waste in terms of food waste and consumer goods.
I bet there could be part of the soil and water conservation people, maybe. I think they maybe sometimes have like grants or they sell water barrels or composters and things like that. So if it were like household organic waste, there could be some kind of like educational partnership with them or something.
Into it. I'm currently a state appointed supervisor for our local soil and water conservation district, and we're working this year to establish a demonstration garden over at the Dittmer Gardens on both cover cropping and composting, kind of like no cover cropping or composting, cover cropping, no cover cropping or composting, cover cropping and composting. And then the third one that's just compost, no cover crop. I'm very limited in what I can promote vis-a-vis soil and water because of my industry connection. But they do have a stormwater grant program, and there have been 2 applicants this year that the board, excluding me, I recuse myself from those votes, that the board did award grants for people to purchase compost for erosion containment and like soil buildup. So that's a good thing. And yes, I completely agree. Leveraging partnerships. The more they hear not from me about partnership opportunities with the districts and the county and the city, the better, because I kind of sing that song all the time. So please, yes, tell them.
Morning, is that something you're considering counting as a goal? A separate goal?
No, I think it would fall under the education, the first goal. So no, that wouldn't be separate. That would just be maybe a means of achievement.
Okay.
I like that as an educational goal because that's what we're finding too, is that there's just a lack of understanding in the area about all the many beneficial uses of compost for agriculture, like ways that it can save farmers money, ways that it can help them like retain their soil and avoid runoff and nutrient loss, and reestablishing native plant communities as buffer zones around where they grow their harvest crops. Like it has so much potential to help, but it's just there isn't much information. And so, I'm limited in how much, again, I can push, but like a partnership between like the district and soil and water, just even on an educational series, even if it were, very low cost, whether it's in person or over Zoom or whatever, I think I think both, I'm sure that the soil and water, my soil and water fellows would be very pleased with that too.
I'm just going to start putting in some means of achievement. So like talking, kind of talking with all of the leaders of the neighborhood associations, and maybe they can educate their neighbors about recycling or composting or all of the above. And if they are an apartment building or rural residents, like they could, well, I don't know if rural residents have neighborhood associations, but some kind of like conglomeration recycling thing,
I love that. Tons. Because the neighborhoods here are so strong that like, getting information out through the Council of Neighborhood Associations even, and just association by association would be awesome. And I think that where there aren't neighborhood associations, there are still HOAs. And I think that maybe each apartment complex could be treated like a neighborhood, and that we could just be like, have a little town hall type meeting and just basically do like a road show. I think that there's like 15 neighborhoods designated in the city of Bloomington, and probably another 20 HOAs scattered between the county and the city. So it'd be like, you do like every other week, that kind of a thing, or maybe even make like a 2-year goal of getting to all of them. But starting especially at the core neighborhoods in the city, I think would be a great thing too. But then again, they also use, they use the single stream system. They're not as much with the drop off. So we'd have to find a way to get to drop off clients as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have recycling. So I think they would need to be educated about contamination and things like that. And people who don't have recycling at all, both contamination and how to recycle, and maybe like working together with the people closest to you. Maybe there could be just like a neighborhood, like a designated person who's like, I go to the recycling center and I will take all y'all's recycling, every Saturday or whatever. Yeah.
It's brilliant. And it's straight from the 92 plan. They talk about block captains. We can do this.
I don't know if the name is still culturally relevant, though. Block point persons, perhaps. Well, in terms of goals and objectives, without having had the time to read through all of the content produced today in the preceding discussion section, I feel like this is a good coverage of at least what we've discussed so far. And Morning, do you mind if the goal number 1 title is limited to diversion education?
Yeah, that's redundant with recycling. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in terms of agenda timing, are there any things that you wanted to discuss on the topic of costs and financing while we're assembled? I personally have nothing that stands out in my mind on that topic. Defining means of achievement is probably a prerequisite step for having a grasp on the operational and capital costs.
Yeah, I'm just adding additional recycling trailers if there were to be more drop-off options under that goal. No need for discussion. I'm just putting it on there.
Okay. Yeah, Ryan, your remark about those internally divided single-stop recycling trailers brought me back to probably around 1992 in my life, when that was sort of how recycling was implemented. I remember there being a chain of grocery stores in the city I was living in where they all had designated spots in their lots for each of those, and we would go there. It might have even been preceding the city curbside services.
Nice.
But yeah, it's effective.
Back to the future.
Right? We need to mine our past for good solutions for the future.
So for goal number 2, it seems like a coordinator would be necessary to coordinate for routing usable waste. That sound right? I don't know what else would be needed except, someone to coordinate.
Right. It does make me think of the remark you had made about having a full-time staff person who would just work through these 5-year goals, because there are so many things like additions to the outreach for the Green Business Network, and just collaborating with city and county government, a lot of things that would require a person in some regular capacity just to be able to make these communications.
I love it. Second.
Because especially seeing the contraction of staff, at least in the last couple of months with the district, there's a lot of, I'll say the opposite, there's pretty much no capacity for taking on extra activities for any of the people who have already taken on adjacent roles from absentees. And it does seem like it would be a really worthwhile investment to be able to have one person designated to following through with all of these things rather than kind of passing them around and trying to get to them when one is able to, which I suspect might have been what happened to the 92 plan. And there is, on that note, one final item that we'll need to discuss following all of the subcommittees is assigning a responsible person. I can't remember the exact verbiage within the state code, but there is a specification for having somebody to monitor and track progress towards the accomplishment of the goals. So that would also be, I think, a core role of an individual within the district if these things are to be realized and to adhere to the state requirements for the management plan.
It seems like a good additional reason to include specific metrics that we're hoping to meet, which of course be approved by the board. But if those, if someone has to, report on how it's going, if we just include words like encourage this, then they'll say we're doing fine. We're encouraging that. But if we have specific metrics, they can, report early on, like, well, we're not on track yet to meeting the goals.
Agreed, and determine how effective each of the methods are. Rather than saying we reached out to this many people, they'll be able to say, has this changed or hasn't it? I would hope.
Yeah.
Nice to see everyone's initials peppered all over this document.
Okay, is there anything after costs? Or was that the last thing on the agenda?
That is the last item on the agenda. Andrew and Tom are going to have a lot to catch up on. But I do feel good about the amount of content that we were able to get covered, particularly in finalizing goals and objectives that we were a little bit behind on for the education committee, or subcommittee rather.
And in terms of like numbers, just to get started on that, I mean, I think the closest in terms of goals that we have for like solid numbers are in the draft of the 2020 Climate Action Plan. I mean, it's ambitious, and not everything that's written up is fully factually accurate. But at the same time, they hired a consultant that helped them develop numerical metrics, and I believe that they want to bring organics down 11.5% by 2030, and they want to bring recyclables down by it looks like 9% by 2030. 9.7% by 2030.
Are those ambitious?
That is a very good question. I started out by saying that they're ambitious. Um, I think because of I think that's mostly because not accounting for the contamination problem. Um, because I feel like for for them to increase, I mean, our strategies for increasing volumes of diversion have all relied on like batching things in ways that end up coming back and biting us in the end. And so that's why I feel like it's ambitious, because like moving to single stream, I mean, that jumped our diversion rate, I'm sure, but it also made our stuff nastier, I'm sure. And so, how we could get metrics on what we diverted actually got recycled, I mean, that would really be, I think, the number um, to find. Because if we're diverting more, but less of it's getting bought by our national partners, then that's not really a big success.
What do you think about the idea of a feedback channel provided by the district on quality of recycled content so that buyers could relay contamination information and maybe even be so kind as to give us numerical information on like contaminated batches or volumes lost to contamination? And they would have a one place where they could go where the district could say, hey, tell us what's happening, and we could actually help drive the acquisition of that information.
Would that also help the district by increasing the price that buyers are willing to pay for less contaminated items?
And I think that would help for education too, if we could tell people like, this is how bad contamination is. Like, this is what industry is saying that they're rejecting because you're doing a bad job of your single stream sorting, or because of the at-large contamination problem, to be less finger pointing about it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, yeah, I like that idea. And that would probably be a separate goal then, yeah? Yeah, it doesn't really fit into any of the existing four.
I wonder if the goal could be something like improve contamination rates. Um, Means of achievement could be the feedback channel, and then I don't know if prices would change from less contamination, or there was something else I was thinking that might fall under a better contamination rate goal. But if I think of it, I'll change it later.
Okay. Yeah, off the top of my head, it seems reasonable to make the goal just to establish the thing rather than trying to set the objective to be the outcomes of establishing it. Like the district can say, we're going to put together this tool, rather than say this tool that we're going to put together will achieve these things. I don't know. I suppose it could go either way.
Oh yeah, I was thinking like if the goal was something like decrease contamination by 50%, then there could be a number of methods. But if it is the goal, like you got to get that goal met, which it probably could go either way. But if you were getting feedback, the goal doesn't state that you have to use the feedback to make changes. So if they, we finished that goal, we got that feedback channel. I'm not going to do anything with it, but so either way, I think it could go either way, goal or means.
How about the goal is to increase something about the increase of relevant or useful data on contamination or waste, I don't know, some domain of waste in general. Something like increase available data on diversion performance.
Is that for all diversion or specifically recyclables?
This is where I've started in this in particular, but I guess the whole notion of having one of the district's objectives being to help make that information available is something that really just occurred to me, rather than just being limited by what information is available and trying to set our goals accordingly. Maybe our goal should be to try to find ways to make more information available so we can make our goals measurable.
So then in 5 years, we can have like something to work with for even longer future goals.
Yeah, that's a good point. If, this channel does yield feedback, our next round of 5-year management planning will be able to use this newly acquired data for benchmarking goals.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully use the feedback before the next goal is both set and,
Indeed.
the deadline of that one. Yeah, that's good.
Good. Well, in terms of our timing, that brings us to within 1 minute of the concluded end time, or the scheduled end time of today's meeting. Does anyone have any final remarks they would like to make before we adjourn?
This was really productive.
Agreed. I would like to thank everyone for their contribution, and Ms. Jones for attending as well. And I look forward to seeing you on, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say I'm really impressed by where you've gotten to so far, and I hope I can keep on following this. It's kind of exciting to hear.
Well, thank you. We're very happy to have you along.
Well, great. Doing a good job.
Thank you.
One last thing. So in terms of timeline, are we doing the same things we did for the other subcommittee and giving ourselves a week to work on this document before we finalize the goals and objectives?
So if you jump to the CAC subcommittee scheduling link at the top of this file, right under the to-do items, that will bring you to our Gantt chart of having the waste diversion means of achievement. So that currently we're scheduled to have goals and objectives finalized as of this meeting, which I think we've pretty close to accomplished. Do either of you feel that we need an extension of time, or maybe can take a day or two? Well, do you have any particular thoughts on how you would like to proceed based on where we stand now?
I think I was hoping to see, I guess not. I think as long as we are addressing reuse in one of the two documents, I don't remember exactly what the goals are for source reduction. So I would just want to be able to check and make sure that reuse is addressed thoroughly in one of the two. That's all.
Okay.
Agreed.
Duly noted.
So maybe just like a day or two to be able to compare, since these two are since diversion and reduction are so closely linked, maybe a day or two to look over both of them together and see if there are any gaps or things that fell through between the two.
All right, that sounds good to me too. I'm just making a note of that to make sure I have that thought. Yeah, I can definitely hold off on considering the goals and objectives finalized until maybe Wednesday. And then we can, with our finalized goals and objectives, once we agree upon them, proceed from there.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you both very much, and I will see you on Thursday evening. Have a great week.
And you too.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.